Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching. This is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM, listener-supported radio serving Fairfield, New Haven and Litchfield counties in Connecticut, Suffolk County in New York, and communities around the world via podcast and streaming. Many of you know now that our talk shows on the Community Strip and some of the other talk shows on PKN are now podcasts. You can listen to them on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. So I hope that you're having a nice day. It's a little rainy here in Bridgeport, Connecticut today. We need the rain, so it's good that we have it. Sometimes a little rain must fall. That's in order for our crops to grow and for our reservoirs to be full so that we have good drinking water. I want to talk to you today a little bit about what you might have heard last week. I hope you got a chance to listen to the show. I promoted it for a few weeks. It was an interview with my colleague Gitu Barwani, and we talked a lot about emotional resilience. I'd like to talk to you about individual resilience, about organizational resilience, about our country's resilience. We certainly are, inundated with information about elections these days, and so we're constantly hearing the different candidates' viewpoints of what's going on from their perspective and why they think they need to be in charge, either at a local level, at a federal level, or even for the presidency. So the question is, how are we really doing as a country? How is your company, department, team doing in an organization that you might be serving and working in? How are you doing individually? And how are we all doing emotionally? The show's called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, and I'm Chuck Wolf. And the Emotion Roadmap is my concept, my platform for helping people learn how to take more responsibility and accountability for how they feel in a good way, in a proactive way, so that if we're feeling something that's not helpful for whatever's going on in our lives, and we want to feel something different, something better, something perhaps even ideal to feel, how do we think that through? How do we plan for that? How do we make that happen? And the show's all about having you call in and speak to me about what's going on for you. And when you do that, and when you have a chance to call me, then I believe everybody learns from that experience, because if I can help you in some meaningful way by introducing you to this idea of an emotion roadmap and helping you think through a place where you might be stuck, a situation where you may be in conflict, or a conversation you're afraid to have because you're fearful that it might escalate into something worse, but you know you need to talk about something with someone that is bothering you, and yet you haven't taken the time or made the time to have the conversation because you're a little fearful about its ultimate outcome. If you're worried about changes that you're trying to adapt to, if you're struggling with a change that's already happened, and you really don't seem to understand what the change is all about, why it's happening, how it's happening, what's happening for the experience for yourself as well as for people you might care about. And it leads me to talk a little bit about leadership today as well. I want to talk about leadership and what it takes to be a leader, to be an effective leader, because when we're really dealing with people that are going to be leaders, when we're actually in the place where we can pick our leaders in politics to some degree, where we have leaders in organizations that we have to work for, or where we might even be people that are in position to hire leaders to work for us. Leaders in our community, leaders in our religious organizations, leaders in our business and nonprofit organizations. When we have a chance to hire people into leadership roles, what is it that we really need? So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. But mostly I'd love to hear from you folks. So if you've got something you've been waiting to call me about, those of you who are regular listeners, thanks so much for tuning in again. Those of you who just happen to be listening today and hearing me for the first time, again, I'm Chuck Wolf. The show's The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. It's all about helping people, and I think of people who are often good critical thinkers, good problem solvers, smart people, that when you and people like you are stuck, it's almost always because something emotional is in play. And by helping you to focus on the emotions, by you calling in and sharing your particular situation with me, I'm able to walk you through this emotion roadmap, and I'll tell you how that works in a minute. But I'll walk you through this emotion roadmap to try and help you in a very specific way with the situation you face at this particular moment in time. At the same time, I'm hoping that everybody that's a regular listener is learning how to use this emotion roadmap for themselves so that when they get the chance to help somebody in their life that they care about who's stuck also, they know how to introduce them to this idea of focusing on emotion. And here's how the emotion roadmap works. You first just think about your situation, your current challenge, your current conflict, your current change that you're experiencing and dealing with. Whatever it is might be that you're struggling with, whether at work or at home. And you think about what are the feelings in play. And I focus specifically on your individual feelings, the feelings you have, as well as the feelings that anybody that might be key to what you're trying to accomplish is feeling. And by focusing on what people are feeling and thinking about the feelings that are in play and realizing that those feelings aren't helpful, perhaps even obstructive, they might be in the way of you getting done what you need to, then asking you, well, if you can make magic happen, what would be ideal to feel for you and anyone that's key in this situation that you've described to me? What would be ideal to feel for you and for any other key people? And once we figure that out, then I ask you, okay, so if the feeling is A and you want to feel B, how do we get there? That's the idea of a roadmap. If you're anxious and you want to feel confident, how do we do that? And in helping you learn how to do that, I'm hoping to help everyone listening learn how to do that, not only for people you care about so you can help them, but also for yourselves. So the number to call is 203-336-9756. And I always come to the show prepared to talk about things I think all of you will find interesting and perhaps helpful, educational, inspirational, motivational, and engaging. But I really find myself, when I watch the show and listen to it, I find that the conversations I have with people around real situations that they're experiencing, that just makes the show that much more meaningful, I think, for you and for me. So the number to call is 203-336-9756. Again, this is Chuck Wolf. The show's The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'm on from 12 to 1 p.m. on the first, second, and fourth Wednesdays of each month. 203-336-9756. So while I'm waiting for someone to call who may have a challenge in their life, and that's the most fun for me, is to try and help somebody with something challenging going on in their life. And again, if you got something going on and you're a little reluctant to call because you're not sure it's something that I think is what I would want to be speaking about, you know what, folks? I'm really open to anything. Here's the first caller. Thank you. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
Hi, my name is Tammy.
Hi, Tammy. How are you?
Oh, I've been better, but I've been worse.
Okay. How can I help you today?
I've got a bunch of stuff going on right now,
Okay.
and I'm not quite sure what to do about it. I have my father living in Virginia, and he's very, very sick. Chances are he might not make it. I'm unemployed. I'm looking for a job, and it seems like there's just way too much stuff going on for me.
So the idea of the show last week, did you happen to catch it last week?
No, I did not. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The reason I mentioned it is it's about emotional resilience, and sure wouldn't hurt to listen to it, given what you just told me, right? I mean, you got some struggles that there's no easy way to deal with a sick father that's living pretty far away from you in a way that's
except to go down and visit, but they won't let me come down until they hear from the doctor. So
okay. So can you now? Do you have resources to allow you to get down when you're not working? I know it's a struggle financially sometimes.
Yes, I have money in the bank, so I'll be okay with that.
Okay, so that's one issue that you're sort of on hold, but you are going to make a visit down to see him.
Oh, definitely. I just hope I get there in time. You know, it's a little frightening.
Okay, so we can talk a little bit about just dealing with, the end of life scenario, which it sounds like what your dad's facing.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is what to do about being unemployed. Do you have a plan for you have a plan for your dad? It's just a question of waiting for something to happen, right? I mean, in order for you to be told you can go down and visit.
Maybe that's why I'm unemployed. I don't know. Maybe it just worked out that way. God's got his hand in it somehow.
Oh, that's an interesting spin on it. So one possibility is that if you had a job, it might be more difficult to take
get the time
out.
off.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I keep thinking about that, so that keeps my head above water.
So
I'm usually pretty resilient. So that's when you started talking about that. I was like, oh, okay, I know that stuff.
So the question, I guess, for you right now is, how are you feeling about? Let's just talk about the unemployment situation first. How are you feeling about that?
Oh, bad. I've been unemployed since the end of April. It was okay on the nice sunny days, but when it gets dark and gloomy, I'm like, I don't have a job. I can't find a job. I'm meeting with someone from Vocational Rehabilitation Services today because I've had some difficulties in my past and finding a job. I've been trying to work for the last 30 years, but I have not been able to. I mean, I held a job for 11 and a half years. I held a job for 7.5 years, but I keep getting let go. So I'm starting to think, well, maybe I shouldn't be working, I mean, I've tried, but
well,
I work for nonprofits, and they all seem to let me go first, so.
No, you had said that you would work for 11 and 7 years, respectively, in jobs, and you keep getting let go. So, is your expectation, Tammy, that you would be hired and it would go on forever until you wanted to retire?
No, but it's like I get laid off because I won't go to school, and I won't go to school because I have some memory problems, and problem solving and planning, et cetera, et cetera. So these things are difficult for me.
Okay.
So I've decided to apply for Social Security. I'm getting close to that age, so.
Okay, so how you're feeling bad about it. It sounds like to me somewhat frustrated because you did hold a job for some time, but upset a bit that you are asked to go to school but feel like you can't. It's something you can't do, and people are not understanding about that.
No, it's like I explain. I have some learning difficulties.
I understand.
And I tell people about it when I'm hired. And, my family says, don't tell people. You don't need to tell them what's wrong with you. And I said, yes, I do. Because when I screw up, they wonder what's wrong.
Right.
And I would rather preface it by letting them know what's going on, And
right. So let me just ask: the fact that you were able to hold jobs for as long as you did, for in two situations, certainly suggests that you're capable of finding another job. Is there some reason you think you couldn't? I understand that you haven't yet, but is there some reason you think?
I think maybe it's the unemployment field at this time, And my benefits aren't going to last forever. I mean, my unemployment benefits aren't going to last forever.
Right.
So it's a little scary, living in Fairfield County and not having any money, not having a job.
Right.
I don't want to end up on the streets somewhere, so.
Right. And so are you starting to lose some of your self-confidence around this, it sounds like?
Oh, definitely. It's people think it's not that big a deal, but it is. It's a blow to your self-esteem big time.
It is. I don't care who you are. For the most part, it's often something that people find it difficult to rebound quickly from. I heard something.
And I haven't had any like high-paying jobs or anything. Just jobs.
Yeah.
But
well, here's how the roadmap works. So what you'd want to feel that's different than how you're feeling now. What do you think would be ideal? Again, the idea of making magic happen. What would you like to feel at the end of this phone call? But not even just for the day, but going forward, what would you like to feel?
Just to have some hope for something that will, maybe not materialize immediately, but that hopefully I'll get that from this appointment this afternoon, so she can, because I'm trying to get some training in something.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that this woman will be able to help me with that. But I think just, being able to see light at the end of the tunnel, the deep, dark tunnel I can't seem to get through.
Well, here's something to think about. So you want to feel hopeful that something could emerge for you.
Yes.
I also think that perhaps you maybe you didn't mention this, but my guess is you'd also want to feel confident in your ability to land something again.
Oh, definitely.
And so if you're feeling somewhat insecure and a little helpless at the moment because nothing's materialized for you, it's the question becomes, how do you then change your feelings? How do you get to feeling confident again? And how do you feel hopeful? I mean, what's going to make that happen? Now, what you just told me is that you have a plan for this afternoon, so potentially that might result in something where the conversation goes really well. And then
I'm hoping it does.
Yeah, well, I understand. And so potentially it could. And that hopefulness may materialize into something meaningful. It may not. The question becomes for me when I talk to people who are unemployed and wanting to be employed is how do you keep yourself up? I read something recently where it said failure isn't about getting knocked down. Failure only really occurs when you don't get back up.
When you can't get up, yes. I agree with you on that.
I've
been knocked down many times, so it's like I know I can get through this, but I feel like I'm treading water. I'm to that point where I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Now let me ask you a question about this, because sometimes the best way to get you to where you want to be in terms of your feelings is to ask you have you been here before, which you just said you have. And so
many times.
is there something that you can look at and think about and feel having to do with those previous experiences where you have rebounded, where you have bounced back, and you were able to overcome adversity? Can you think of anything that was relevant that in the past worked for you that might be helpful now?
Honestly, I don't know how I did it before. I really don't. Something just appeared, and then I went for the job interview, and I got the job. And then 5 years later, they let me go. And I'm like, oh, come on. But I have to believe that there's something out there. There's something that's carried me this far, and I'm not going to get dropped on my behind.
Okay, so one of the things you're talking about is like faith. It sounds like you talked a little about destiny, having you being unemployed at this moment so you could find some time to get down and see your dad. You talked about something that just appeared, and you had an interview and you did get hired, and somehow, some way, life has been good to you, even though it's thrown you some curves or some knuckleballs, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're flying in the air right now.
Right.
But
so
I'm confused about which way to go. What do I look at? What kind of positions do I want to work at? I don't get paid a lot of money for what I do.
Okay.
I work nonprofits with mental health or with children or drug and alcohol addiction. And those fields don't pay an enormous amount if you don't have any initials behind your name. And I don't have those initials.
I understand.
So, I volunteer for Connecticut Hospice. I do stuff that I know I'm not going to get paid for it, but at least it's going to keep me out of trouble.
And usually when you do things like that, people recognize your work ethic. They recognize your commitment, even when you're not being paid. And I think sometimes it's, it's not the same group necessarily that you do something positive for that helps you out, but it seems to me that people that do positive things for other people, it seems to come back to them in different ways.
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so. I haven't given up yet, but I'm just getting frustrated,
Right.
Because I'll spend 3 hours on the computer, and then I'm like, well, okay, what did I accomplish? Nothing. I looked at a bunch of jobs. I was looking at a job this morning in Rockland County.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to go to Rockland County from Stanford, That's just a little too far for me, so. But it's a job, and if they want to give me a job, then I'll go,
Well, I can't help you with getting employed, but what I can possibly suggest to you is that the things that have worked for you in the past, it sounds to me, is one is to have faith.
Right.
There's reasons why things happen. The second is the fact that you've been employed, and when you were employed, had a good track record, even though at some point there were things asked of you that you couldn't do, and so they released you. That doesn't mean that you'll be released from the next position. And the fact that you advocate for yourself by suggesting to people who do choose to hire you what your perhaps
limitations are.
Yeah, that's a good word. Limitations might be. I have a daughter who's a special education teacher, and she has a couple of disabilities herself, and she learned early on how important it is to advocate for yourself when you do have
Right.
disabilities, and she made that her career. And it sounds like in some ways you have too. I mean, you're trying to reach out to people that have mental disabilities or mental challenges, and you've kind of taken whatever ability you had and tied into that community to try and help people feel better, be better.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds about right. Thank you. I didn't realize that, but I want to do something to help, and that's I think part of the battle there is that the reason I want to do what I want to do is because I want to help people, and I'm hoping that this will work out for me. It's worked in the past, and I see no reason it shouldn't work now. So put a positive spin on it. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome for that. But the other thing I would say to you is suggest when you have the conversation with the person that you're meeting with this afternoon, that you tell her a little bit about how you're approaching looking for a job, and you ask her for any specifics she might be able to give you to help you to narrow your focus. I remember meeting someone one time, and he was dating one of my daughters, and he was unemployed. And as a father, I thought, well, that's not great.
That's not the guy I want.
That's not great. Except what he said to me, I thought was great. He said, when I've been unemployed before, but the way I look at it is I'm not really unemployed because my job is to get up every morning and to focus on what do I need to do to get work.
Right. That's basically what I do.
And so
I don't always find it, but I do it.
No, I think the fact that you have that kind of work ethic, first of all, anyone that's listening may call up and maybe offer you something.
Who knows?
Yeah, it's a community radio station that way. But the other thing that I wanted to say to you about that is that just looking for a job and spending hours on the computer is great, but having a focus and prioritized choice of activities, that's what perhaps the person this afternoon can help you with. So that when you go in and see her, tell her a little bit about what you're doing. But, you're trying to decide, geez, how far can I really drive to? Even if the job looks good, what makes sense in terms of trying to have a focus and prioritize. So when you do finish looking at the end of 3 or 4 hours that you spend on a given day, you feel like you accomplished something meaningful. May not get you the job yet, but I think if you feel a little more focus, that's also going to help you to feel more hope and feel more confident. Does that make sense?
That does make. Ooh, I just put skin lotion in my hair. Shoot. Sorry, I'm trying to do a bunch of things at one time.
Well, then definitely my point about being more focused is on target, I think.
Yes, definitely. All right, let me go wash my hair again. Thank you so much.
Okay, nice talking to you, Tammy. Thanks for the call.
And
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay. Folks, that's the show's about trying to focus on feelings and then thinking about how to get to the feelings you want. You create plans that make more sense than perhaps what you might be thinking on your own. So please give me a call if you've got something going on. It's great to have somebody to call. Thank you so much for the call, Tammy. I hope your meeting goes really well today, and somehow, some way, I think something good is going to happen for you because it's happened before and in the past, and people that do nice things for other people, it seems to me that it often comes back to you. The number to call is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. You're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, serving Fairfield, New Haven, and Litchfield counties in Connecticut, Suffolk County in New York, and communities around the world via podcast and streaming. You can hear us on podcast now. For people who want to hear the show on emotional resilience, you can go to any of the three that I mentioned. You can go to SoundCloud and type in Emotion Roadmap. You can go to iTunes and type in Emotion Roadmap. And you can go to Stitcher and type in Emotion Roadmap and look for the date, for last Wednesday's date. And that'll be the show. It was a good interview with Gitu, a colleague of mine, friend from United Kingdom, who's written a really neat book called Emotional Resilience. You might enjoy reading it. I know I did. Again, the show is called The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Take the wheel. Take control over how you feel. Here's the next caller. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
My name is Steven.
Hi, Steven. Thanks for calling. How can I help you today?
So, is the name Chuck? Is your name Chuck?
Yes, it is. Chuck Wolf.
Hi, Chuck. I actually just tuned in, and I'm listening to your show. Fantastic show, by the way.
Thank you.
I just stumbled upon some information which I thought was quite interesting. It actually pertains to my personal life, and that is perfectionism, procrastination, and OCD.
Hey, Steven, can I just ask you, if you've got your radio turned on, could you turn it down? It just has a little bit of an echo.
Okay, I just turned that down.
Thank you.
Okay. So I am calling just to hear your thoughts about how those three personality traits are inextricably linked together, and also how frustrating it could be when a person has the personality trait.
Well, it's an interesting challenge for me. So your three, the three items that you mentioned were perfectionism, procrastination, and what was the last one?
OCD.
Oh, OCD. Well, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is manifest in different ways. So for me to talk about it, if it's going to be helpful to you and not just general, you need to give me a little insight into how it plays out in your life. The other two are kind of easy to tie together, but do you want to say a little bit more about OCD?
Sure. So, I'm not washing my hands 500 times a day, and I don't go back to check the door to see if the door is locked throughout the night. However, I do have tendencies such as organization, wanting to have things organized, which I feel sort of goes back to the perfection trait. But I think with the OCD, it's more of having things order.
So so you're saying you have some tendencies to disorganization?
No, to organization.
Oh, to organization. Is that a bad thing?
Yes, I believe sometimes when it's extreme, or I tend to spend too much time on details.
Okay.
So I'd like to curb that.
Okay, all right. So you're part of that organization tied to perfectionism. It can is causing you discomfort, and at times when you realize what you're doing, it makes you upset somewhat. And procrastination. Sometimes for me, procrastination, if I understand how it relates to, at least in one potential way, to perfectionism, is I'm afraid to tackle something until I absolutely have to, because I want it to be perfect, and I know how hard it's going to be to try and make it perfect. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's actually, I think you used actually a very good description of my day-to-day.
And because organizationally you want to put things in order, and that is one of the compulsive feelings that you get for whatever reason that's part of who you are, And so you want that to be perfect. Somehow, when you get caught up in it, when you finally do it, you can't let go because, I mean, if you look at the problem I have sometimes myself with organization is there are so many choices about where you might put a file. How do you actually ever decide so that you'll remember? My wife jokes with me about that because I could be far better organized than I am. And so, maybe I could borrow a little bit of what you got going on, and you could tone it down a bit for yourself. So
Right.
here's the way I think about all this stuff. I mean, it ties back into this idea of what the show's about, which is, can you control more of the feelings you're having about these things? So one of the things that I have learned in doing this work over a number of years is that to recognize when I go down a particular pathway inside myself and I'm feeling a certain way, and I'm feeling a certain way that I know the thoughts I'm having, the actions I'm taking, the feelings I'm experiencing, they're all on a path that doesn't lead to a good place. It never ends well.
Yes,
Right?
I can agree with that.
Okay. And so one of the things that I find is that if I know early to catch it, when I recognize that I'm on a path that isn't going to end well, I got to find ways to be more effective in life, to be able to get off that path and take a detour. That's the idea of taking the wheel and controlling how you feel instead of just letting these things drive you.
Yes.
So, for instance, one of the things that I'd suggest, and you can find this, I think you can find it pretty easy, but maybe not. But there's something called Public Radio Exchange, prx.org is the website.
Familiar with it, and I'm driving, so I wouldn't be able to.
Well, maybe if you can remember public radio, you're listening to community radio. But if you can you remember public radio,
Sure.
all right. Well, if you can remember Public Radio Exchange, that might be the hot part might be Exchange. But anyway, if you remember, or you know the name of my show, or you're just listening, but it's called The Motion Roadmap. If you Google it and you find my website, you can email me and I'll send you the link to this show. Because what I want to tell you is I did a whole show on just good enough is perfect.
I'm just finding that out actually very recently. I just found out that it doesn't have to be perfect, and there's actually beauty in imperfection.
Ah, okay. That's a great way to think about it. One of the things that I learned in my lifetime was that I think in some ways the idea of wanting to be perfect, I mean, in some ways, I'd love having somebody who worked for me want to make sure everything was perfect, because who doesn't want something that's always really high standard and great quality? That's the flip side of it, right? What happens though is if it becomes compulsive, which it will be for you because that's kind of who you are, then it's never quite good enough. They used to there was a joke in leadership training when I was in Exxon about the design engineer. I worked for Exxon for a few years. The design engineer that never is finished with the design because it always can be better. And so you never get to production because the design engineer will never turn it over unless you put deadlines and you say whatever it is has got to be good enough. But anyway, that echoed in my head. And one of the things that I discovered in my own life was in trying to be perfect at times, if I miss one thing, if I was just a little bit off, I'd really be hard on myself. And I began to realize that the tension that came from trying to be perfect often made me less than even just good enough.
Yes, I agree.
And so one of the things that I find, and this might be helpful to you, is if you can ask yourself, as you get to a certain point, is, trying to establish criteria as you go into doing an activity that I want to know what perfect looks like. And I also want to have criteria that tells me when it's just good enough. And when it's just good enough, I want to say to myself, I need to let go now. And I need to move on to the next thing. And when I'm able to do that, I'm going to feel good about it. And I'm realize the echo in my head is going to be, you can't leave. You got to make it better. You got to make it perfect. And when you experience that, one of the things I would do, Stephen, is what you did just now, which is kind of laugh about it. You can expect to hear that voice in your head and say, I'm not playing that game anymore.
Yes.
I'm not playing that game anymore, but I recognize that the game's still trying to play me.
Huh. That's interesting. Well, just to add to your point, I actually work in IT, and the example which comes to me after you described the situation that you deal with is Microsoft actually puts out software which isn't perfect and relies or depends upon the users to make it perfect. So they put out a beta version of their product and depend heavily on users for their feedback and the imperfections that they see while they use the product. And that's how they perfect their product. So I think we can all use this as an example of curbing the perfection disease, if you will.
Well, if you take my advice that I've just given you as somewhat imperfect, and you're the user that has to make it better, I think the model works.
Yes, it does. And thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for the phone call, Stephen, and good luck with it.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Tammy. So the number to call is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. So the show is all about helping you take the wheel and control how you feel. And I hope everybody listening is getting a sense of how this emotion roadmap works. You know, you kind of think about what's going on, what's troubling, what's difficult, and we have a next caller. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
Hi there, Chuck. Happy rainy day. This is Casey in New Haven.
Hi, Casey. How are you?
I am doing just fine despite the rain. Well, actually, I'm welcoming the rain because the world needs it.
Yes, it does.
I am a proud WPKN volunteer, and I've been listening to your show for a very, very long time. It helps me tremendously.
Oh, thank you,
and
Casey.
I just wanted to share a couple of things.
Sure.
In the 12-step rooms, I have heard a story. Well, first of all, my own, shall we say, challenges with my nervous system go back a long time. And I do remember working for a friend of mine years ago who stopped me in the middle of something and said, "You overthink everything." And the light went on in my head. I mean, I was in my 50s, and I had never really thought about my tendency toward perfectionism and how it interfered with so many of the things I wanted to do. Just had to get it right, had to get it absolutely perfect. And so that helped me a lot, and I started an exploration of that. But I heard a few years back in a 12-step group the story of how the people who weave the Persian rugs, Persia, now Iran, still have a proud tradition of these, as we know, just stellar, high-quality, incredible works of art rugs. And apparently there's a tradition among them to weave a flaw into each rug, purposely choose a spot, and know that they're going to do something that doesn't belong there. And it may or may not be visible to the consumer. But their belief is that only God makes perfect. Humans are not capable of perfection. So they might as well go ahead, weave in a flaw, get it done with, and get on with their work.
How's that serve you?
Well, it does help to reel myself in sometimes from the edge and say, you know, good enough really is good enough. And then I try to think about how something is going to be received, how important is it, what is the timeline for it, and honestly, on my deathbed, how am I going to look back? Wishing I had spent more time on that project? Usually the answer is no. So thinking about, okay, God is perfect, humans can make progress, humans can do their best, but no human's ever going to be perfect. It's helped me to realize that I can get to good enough. Now, usually I push a little bit past good enough still, but then I can move on. and not have it haunt me and not rethink it and not have it torture me. Just good enough, on to the next thing. And staying busy helps as well.
Let me see if I can help you, like, take another kind of small step on the path you're on, because it sounds like you're on the right path. You feel that way, right?
I do. Yes, usually I do.
And the usually is why I think maybe this other, what I might say, might be a little bit of help for you, Casey. So,
I'm open to anything you might have to offer. As I say, listening to your show has helped me a lot over the years.
well, I really appreciate that. And so here's the thought I'm having as I'm listening to you. So I have talked a few times about being just good enough, and I had forgotten that when I actually did this show about it, I titled it "Just Good Enough is Perfect." Because what you said, and where you're a little stuck, is you said just good enough is just good enough. And if you take another step and say just good enough is perfect and can let go.
I like that.
If you can just take that little next step, it's going to make life a little bit better for you, I think.
I like that. I think because I was raised with the phrase practice makes perfect over and over and over, as though there were anything we could practice enough to become absolutely perfect at it. Even the master musicians and artists and sports figures will tell you they're still working. They're still learning. So recently I've learned to say practice makes progress. And what I think you're saying is just good enough is progress toward that perfection that's not achievable. But if I really put everything I have into something, just good enough is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you kind of reframed it for yourself. Though, yeah, I really, it's not like, and this is funny too, in some ways, what I'm about to say. It's not like every time I'm perfect about this, about just being good enough is really perfect. But when I start to find myself kind of pressuring myself to be even better, at some point, it's kind of like that design engineer I was just talking about. At some point, if I'm putting a program together or a speech together, I'm going to talk to a large group of people or something, and everything has to be perfect, I'm never going to finish that speech. Mm-hmm. But if I figure I've got most of this covered, I've really captured most of what this audience is going to need to hear from me, and I've done it in a way that's going to resonate. And if I can do that, and I'm going to miss some people, I know I'm not going to hit everybody, that's perfect, because the people that are able to hear what I have to say, that are open to what I have to say, and have come to learn to something different that's going to be meaningful to them, they're going to hear my message. And those that are too negative and just can't hear it yet or now or ever, I'm not going to catch them. That's okay.
That is so true. And so few people are going to ignore the entire message just because one sentence is not complete or one hair is out of place. Those aren't the people who are ready. You're right. I learned a lot about that when I was teaching, actually, now that I think about it, that no matter what my agenda was, I would have to go into the classroom on any given day and realize that things might change and the agenda might have to go out the window. So even planning it to the millisecond wasn't necessarily going to work because things change. They just do.
And you know what? I would have a hard time with myself if I had prepared something that I thought should have been right and wasn't. And now I just realize, well, this isn't going the way that I wanted or expected. and so, gee, what's happening? And my senses are open, and I allow input, and I'm not defensive, and I just kind of figure out, well, if that's not what they needed, then what do they need, and can I be helpful? And if I can't, I'm sorry. It's not what I understood, and maybe it's my fault, and I'll move on. But and I'll feel bad about it, but I won't beat myself up anymore. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I think you'll find, because of what you've just told me about yourself, is that even though we just talked about this, you're still going to find you wanting that perfection every time, Casey, because that's who you are. You just said that.
Oh, always.
And what I think's really important is not different than Stephen, is when you catch yourself pushing yourself that way, treat it lightheartedly. Don't get upset about it because you know it's coming. But when it comes, same thing I said to Stephen. You know what? I'm not going to play anymore. At least I'm not going to play today because I'm on top of my game.
What you're saying now reminds me of something. I had forgotten this until just now, but a friend of mine suggested a phrase that actually works really well for me, and apparently she got it from an Alec Baldwin movie called State Street, which I've never seen.
Okay.
But at some point he's with somebody who's underage and he's drunk and he wrecks a car and they crawl out and look at the wreckage and he says, well, that happened. And I have used that. You chuckled too, right?
Right.
I have used that successfully, whether it's, I failed to put whatever I'm holding close enough to the center of the counter, it falls off the edge and breaks, I have to deal with it, or I missed an appointment because I forgot to write it down, or I double booked, or whatever it is, large or small. If the first thing I do is just take a breath and look at it and go, well, that happened.
Right.
I actually end up smiling, and then I deal with it.
There you go. So if you can find a little, if you can apply that happened to when your mind starts to race to push you to be perfect, if you can somehow combine the humor in that with, the message that's coming from inside of you deep down, and you know that you want to resist that message because it's not a helpful message, it's actually somewhat destructive for you.
Kind of like saying, well, this is happening.
Yep. Here.
or even apply it to something that's coming up in the future that I don't particularly want to face, like, well, that's going to happen.
You know what? I know your politics, so this may not resonate with you, but this is something that President Reagan said in the debates when he won election. He said something. He said, "Here we go again." And that sort of resonates for me too, because if you catch yourself going down that same path, and it's kind of like, here we go again. It was kind of a funny line, and it made people stop and chuckle. And when you can laugh a little bit at yourself and whatever words you choose to use, it helps you to get off that path that ends poorly, and put you down a different path that says, I know who I am, I recognize who I am, and I can be better, but I don't have to be perfect.
Even Ronald Reagan could be right now and then. Thank you so much, Chuck, and bless you for your work.
Oh, thanks a lot for the phone call, Casey. Great to talk to you. Take care.
Be well.
Bye-bye. Well, folks, I got about 5 minutes left. If anybody else wants to call, it's 203-336-9756. I want to thank Casey, Stephen, and Tammy for the phone calls today. It's a really fun show for me when I'm able to help people who are calling in. So, again, I got about 5 minutes left, and sometimes if I can help you, I'd love to. 203-336-9756. But in the meantime, a couple things that I'll just chat with you about while I've got some time, because I had wanted to talk a little bit about leadership, and I'm coaching someone these days that is going through, it's sort of a downsizing, where this person is responsible for having to let some people go, and it's a person who wants very much to find a place for each person that works for them. Oops, here's another call. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who's calling?
Hi, Chuck. This is Marie.
Hi, Marie. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. And what can I do for you?
Well, I lost my job in January, and my unemployment has just run out, and I'm kind of at a crossroads. I'm not really at retirement age, but if I could help it, I just don't want to go back into the workforce. And I'm just a little scared about it. The feeling that comes up for me is just fear of the unknown, and I don't really know my best thinking when I'm a little bit in that place.
Okay, so a couple things have happened. One is you've lost your job, and you're not sure you want to go back into the workplace. So you're not. Are you actively seeking employment, or you're sort of on hold?
I'm on hold. I have been on hold.
Okay, and part of you is, you would be okay if you didn't go back to the workplace, but you're uncertain about what it means if you're not working.
Yeah.
Okay, so in some ways you're in a place financially that you're okay, but
Yeah.
you don't. Okay, great. Okay, so that's one thing that's a good thing. The concern of the unknown. I think, boy, you're certainly not alone, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that are facing retirement, baby boomer generation, so forth, that are looking into the I think part of this, Maria, is that it's kind of like the next chapter in our lives.
Yeah.
And none of us really want to get to that end chapter.
Yep.
And so that's a little scary too, right? So part of that is like recognizing where we are and knowing that it's the next chapter and being a little bit afraid of the next chapter. But if you could think a little bit about it as if you were writing a great novel of your life, and you kind of think about what the other chapters have been about, and you ask yourself, hey, what would I want to have next? It's kind of like asking the question about what do I want to feel about going forward? And it would seem like the feelings you'd want would be, I want to be excited about the future. I want to embrace the unknown. I want to do things that I've always dreamed about, thought about, considered, but they would never seem like they were realistic because I always had a time commitment where I couldn't really take the time to make them happen. And they don't have to be adventurous things. They could be something simple, a volunteering in an agency, a quilting class, a photography class. It could be something that learning how to play an instrument. I mean, it doesn't have to be like, geez, I want to go, skydiving, although it could be. But it's asking yourself, so how do I think about the outline for the next chapter? Does that help at all, like in terms of framing?
It does. And I have started to volunteer just because I've had a lot of time on my hands.
So volunteering is a great way to kind of fill the time, because I think anytime you give back to people, first of all, it opens up other avenues. You're just meeting new people. It's a network of sorts. And, you never know who you're going to run into who has some kind of proposition that you'd never considered, but maybe you'd like to make part of that next chapter.
That's true.
The other thing is to just dedicate some time as if you were a writer or just kind of and just wanted to outline. This is it's kind of a tough message, but I mean, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, and there's no time left in life for us, was there something we missed that we wish we had done? I mean, that's one of the questions to ask.
Okay.
And if you ask that question, what would it be? And is it realistic at all? Is it realistic with some planning? Is it something that involves other people? Who else would I like to do this with? And you start to create a list of activities, and then you may not do them all. It's kind of like this idea of a bucket list, I guess, but it's more focused. It's not just like an adventure or something you thought about. It's more about you planning your life in terms of, rather than fear it, what if I embraced it? And I thought about things that, if you go back and you think about the past, things that you've loved doing over your lifetime. Are there some things you'd like to do more of? Some things you never got to that you always thought you might want to. And I'd start to look at it like that and start to create a list of things and then start to pull the outline together. And that just gives you confidence, I think, in having a plan going forward as opposed to, holy crap, what's tomorrow about?
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. Makes sense.
All right. Well, I had to do it fast because I'm out of time.
I know. Okay.
Thanks a lot for the call, Marie. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. You've been listening to Chuck Wolf, the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. We had 4 callers today. Neat show. Tammy, Stephen, Casey, and Marie. And hope everybody listening got some thoughts and ideas about how to make life better, how to take that wheel and control how you feel. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and everybody have a great rest of the summer here. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.